I think, the communication that we have with kids about it, which is social media is no different than any form of communication. It's different from talking in person, but it's a form of communication. So if you're not going to be positive in nature with what you're saying in person, then you need to make sure you're not doing that online.
Welcome to Success Never Rests. We got Coach Jake Garner with us today. Our motto here at Success Never Rests is on your worst day, be good, on your best day, be great, and on every other day, get better. Just knowing you, I've been able to spend the last year and a half, 2 years around you in the gym. I know that you take it very, very seriously, the interactions with your kids. I know you took a lot of attention in the classroom. And I still know you find time for your family. So all of these things, I've been in that same boat before. I know you have to have this mindset of success never resting. Absolutely. In order to get through it. So let's get into it. Welcome. Appreciate you coming by today.
I appreciate it.
All right. First off, I'm a big believer that we're a product of the 5 people we surround ourselves with late in our lives when we're adults. But I've kind of found that as I've interviewed people, I think it might be more important who we were surrounded by when we were younger. Yeah. So I always like to ask people, I like to ask them about their background, just kind of give you a chance to tell us a little bit about where you came from and, who influenced you when you were young to kind of set this mindset you have today.
Yeah, so we kind of have in common that we're from small towns. Yeah. And so it's funny that people will say that they're from a small town, and then I hear it and I'm like, no, you're not. So I grew up in Tom Bean, which most people mistake for Tom Ball, and I'm like, no, it's like 3 times the size of Tom Bean. So 1,000 people, classic, one street light, and it's always blinking. Not a whole lot of business. While I was growing there, it's gotten better. But it's funny, like you mentioned, like product of your environment. That's exactly, throughout my life I felt that way. And so I grew up with people that I'm still friends with today. And we, growing up in that small town, I think that happens a lot more. Even though I kind of left, went off to college. Came back to the area in general, but I don't work around there. Yeah. I still stay close to them. Unfortunately, coaching, as you know, will take away some of that time and, that you put into those relationships. But that made a huge impact on me of growing up in a small town, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And it was a little bit of a culture shock when you go to a place like Prosper, and they tell you that you're going to go upstairs and about 4 hallways down, and you're used to 2 hallways and that's it. Mm-hmm. I graduated with 65 people. Yeah. I can walk by our cafeteria and see just about as many people that were in my hometown in the cafeteria at lunchtime. So it was a lot different, but I was really blessed, like everybody. Everybody usually has a story like mine of having that one coach. So I was blessed in the sense that I had great parents that instilled in me characteristics that I feel like have attributed to any amount of success that I've had so far. Yeah. And so that what I was getting at home was exactly what I was getting from a guy named Chad Ashlock. He was a middle school coach from a small town. They coach everything, middle school, high school, all the sports. And I had him all the way through, and he was the one constant that I had. I had different football and basketball coaches come in and out. The one constant that I had was Coach Ashlock, but he was really just that constant extension of the same messages that I was getting at home. I was getting from him, and my dad was really hard on me, very disciplined, and I was getting that. My dad would drop me off at school. Right when I walked in the door, there was Coach Ashlock to get me in the gym or on the football field, and I was getting that same thing no matter where I was going. And I think that made a huge impression. And my parents raised a reasonable kid. I knew I wasn't going to the NBA. I thought maybe I had a chance to play college basketball. But because of that relationship with Coach Ashlock, I started having the different perspective from then on, because I knew that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. You're that age, athletics is everything for you. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I had an interest in wanting to be a teacher because that's what he did. Yeah. And I had him in class too, again. And he was there's the stereotype of coaches in the classroom, and he was not that. He made it interesting for me. And so really just from that point, I had a different perspective. I looked at things from a coaching perspective, from a teacher perspective, all the way through. And, I immediately had that goal, basketball being number one for me, that's what I want to do, is to be a head coach. And it was because of him and because of how I grew up and how I was raised.
Cool. We do have parallel kind of growing up. I did grow up in Oklahoma and you in Texas, but 24 people in my graduating class.
You got me beat there.
And what was your, a lot of people I'm sure you graduated with, a lot of people I graduated with are probably within 30 miles of our high school.
Right.
I'm most likely the only one out of the 24 that got as far away as I did. I always had intentions of, I wanted to coach big school basketball. I don't know if it goes back to Hoosiers, but did you always want to coach big school basketball?
No, growing up in a small town, I just had I had no frame of reference for a large school.
Yeah.
I had it in my head that you didn't get to see your varsity players until they showed up their junior year, because it was just a foreign concept. I mean, I grew up around Sherman, so Sherman at that time was a little bit bigger than it is now. Like, even that seemed just so foreign for me, to be able to be in that environment. So I wanted to be an offensive coordinator in football, and I wanted to be the head basketball coach, because I knew you had to coach football, and I love football, and I played it. Should have been what I pursued to try to go play college, but no, I didn't until I got to Prosper, and I was a student teacher there, and so I learned very quickly, you get to build a program 7 through 12 no different than at a small school, and immediately I was hooked. Being in that environment, seeing the resources and everything that comes with a big school environment, I just wanted it. And I was really blessed in the sense that, and it's still true today, even though we're blowing up in Prosper, that now we're getting more campuses, and those campuses are growing, but there's a community within the district around that campus. Yeah. And so being at the figurehead at Prosper High School, as long as I have been, going into next year, they were the beacon for that community. Yeah. And then now it just spreads to, Rock Hill has theirs, and now we have Walnut Grove, and there's still that sense of community, but just around that one campus. So you still get that small town feel. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely want to, fell in love with being the big school or bigger school environment.
Well, let's move on to Walnut Grove. In the spring, you were named the first men's head basketball coach there. It's the newest high school in Prosper, and I want you to tell me a little bit about first what it means to you that your first head coaching job, you get to go in and have the opportunity to start that program.
It means everything. Like I said, I started out in Prosper doing my student teaching. So, there's I couldn't have been any lower in the climb, to climb the ladder, as people will say.
Yeah, certainly.
And so I did, the student teaching, middle school, all the way through high school. So really it's just you feel a sense of obligation or responsibility to those people that invested in you and put time into you and believed in you. They knew that was your goal, to be able to achieve it. And so that's the first thing, that was kind of the first emotions that I went through when I got it. And that's been the ultimate goal, so now you're kind of sitting there with a feeling of now what, but immediately you get into the thoughts of building your program. And I went back and forth before interviewing for Walnut Grove of, do you want to pursue a brand new program because we're a district that is growing, or do you want to, wait and stay at a place like PHS, or you just find that open job that you feel like fits you. And the longer time went on, I think that the idea of starting from the ground up is what I started to really be focused on, and everything just fell into place. As you know, Walnut Grove got moved up a year early, and so it kind of got sprung on us, and I was just super excited to jump at the opportunity.
Yeah. How do you plan on putting your stamp on, you've got a group of kids that are coming from two different cultures. Mm-hmm. One you were involved with and, were helping develop at Prosper High, but then you're bringing in, some kids from a completely different culture. Rock Hill.
Right.
And when I say culture, I'm just talking straight basketball and what they've been doing at Rock Hill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you intend on putting your stamp and your philosophy on two different groups, basically, to make one?
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm lucky in the sense that I have a lot of great relationships with the kids. One, that are coming from PHS because they've been with me for various years. And then two, I'm from the district, right? Like I know the expectations of the district, which are very high, and that's a great thing. That's the great thing about being in Prosper ISD. But now it's just about getting to know those kids, you know? And so you're kind of pulled in two different directions where I just want to get to know those Rock Hill kids and know where they're coming from and just trying to find out more about them. But at the same time, I've got to give the PHS kids a new opportunity because I want them to do the same for me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in a different role. They need to have a different view of me, and I need to have a different view of them a little bit. And so everybody's really on that kind of clean slate, if you will. But, you know, really at the beginning of the year, I actually met with my assistant coach, Ian Spate, coming from Hebron High School. Got super lucky, guy that was number one on my list. I was able to get him. He fits the profile that I wanted, checked all the boxes. But we met yesterday about how we're going to start after we get done with tryouts and we settle in. You know, we're basically going to have a boot camp. And so it's not going to be, you know, straight military style boot camp. But, I mean, in some senses it is. But it's really just making the kids understand, like, we're back. This is not where you came from. And that doesn't mean negative or positive. Like, this is something that's new, and we're doing this together. That's the number one thing. And the biggest thing for me is, like, this is how we're going to work. And so you can come up with, you know, your motto, your pillars, your culture, your philosophy, whatever it is you want to call it. And every good or great program works hard.
Yeah.
If you don't define for your kids how you're going to do that, you're not going to be as efficient, or you're not going to be able to achieve it. And so that's the number one thing I want to do, is just get to know the kids and show them how we're going to work hard. Because I know that our kids, we have great kids in Prosper. I know that they're going to show up and work hard, but I need to let them know how and give them a frame of reference so that they can be successful.
What it looks like to you.
Right, exactly.
Hard work looks like different things to different people. But what it looks like to Coach Garner is what the definition of it.
Yes, sir.
So, Coach, I believe to be a great coach, you have to, you know, be a triple threat. First of all, I think you have to have a system. Second, I think you need to be able to teach the skills within that system. And then third, I think you really have to be able to build relationships with those people playing in your system. And I want to talk about number three because it's, you know, I know you have the other two, but I think you do a great job at the relationship piece of this puzzle. So, you know, and you mentioned it coming up, you know, I just want to get to know these kids.
Right.
So it kind of goes right into here is, you know, where do you personally start, you know, when building a relationship with a young athlete?
I think it's just, you look at it as a two-way street of, obviously we want to get to know your kids. Like, we all know that as great coaches, we need to get to know our kids on a personal level. But in doing that, it needs to be an exchange. It just doesn't need to be you. It's great to, like, find out more about them, but at the same time, like, you got to give yourself and open yourself up. And there needs to be, when you're finding those things out, that you're relating to them or seeing what your different interests are. And so I just think it's great, the nature of basketball, just being able to spend time in the gym. Like, we've been having an open gym this past week on top of our skills, and just don't really pay attention to the game that's going on, walking around, being able to talk to guys, whether they're kids I've known for years or they're new kids that I'm getting to know, or they're kids that I've started to build a relationship since I got the job. That's number one, where you start. But I think the other thing is time. You know, I think one thing I did an okay job of at Prosper High was, and kids have told me this after they graduate, was, Coach, if you weren't there, we knew it was weird. Like, it was not normal that you weren't there. And so, you know, it's just that putting in the time and them always seeing you there. They're never going to understand how hard we work as coaches, and they don't need to. And in fact, we need to kind of shield them from a lot of that stuff because they're kids. But them seeing you every single day and just knowing that consistency, because if you're doing the job right and you're building these kids up, they're going to end up having the thought of, at one point, hopefully sooner rather than later, that, hey, like, he's putting in the time, I need to step it up too.
Yeah.
And it might not happen with all of them, but you're hoping that you can get as many as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. People tell me all the time that basketball as a game has changed. I came up through the mid 80s and 90s. Basketball was a brutal fight back then with the Pistons and the Bulls and the Celtics. But people now, they're talking about how the game's changed. I don't feel it's changed in that way as much, but it has changed in the fact of, especially here in Texas, we've just had an exodus even over the last month of our top players in our state and the country leaving our state to go to other states. So, I was having a conversation with one of the coaches that lost a player out of state, and we were talking about, have we now done our jobs as a high school coach? If a kid has the talent, if we develop them to a point where they have a chance to go play at one of these academies, have we done our job? And do we just need to be happy about it? Just like we were happy when they graduated and went to Duke, right?
Right.
Should we be happy they're seniors and they have the opportunity to go to IMG or a Link Academy or something? You're in the middle of it now. I'm not. Share with me what you think about it.
I think, number one, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, like, the where I first go with it is any kid. It doesn't matter if they're the 12th kid on the end of your bench, the old cliche, or the best player on your team. Like, it's a coach's job to help them achieve their goals, whatever that is. And some of them might be, I want to make money playing basketball. Some of them, I wanted to have the best possible career in high school. Some of the coach, I just want to be part of something, right? Like, we have a big spectrum of different situations that these kids fall on. And I think that no matter who that kid is, you should be helping them to achieve their goals. Sometimes that means that when a kid walks in, they might have that tough question of, Coach, is going to this academy going to help me achieve that? And when it's one of those places like you mentioned, a Mount Bird, or it's Link, or it's Oak Hill, whatever the case may be, when it's one of those top tier elite programs, you have to, as a coach, you got to have that conversation with that kid. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to make money one day playing basketball? Is this going to help you?
Yeah.
And if it is, like, I think coaches gotta. It sucks on our part, right? Because we're losing that kid, but we want to do what's best for that kid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that coach that you're speaking to, or it's happened. There's countless examples of it. I haven't seen any of those coaches have 2 or 3 of them. I'll be lucky to have one of those in my entire career.
Yeah.
And so you might have that one situation, and usually in that one situation, it might be that they need to leave. I think the issue that people have and the conflict comes in some of the, hey, I'm going to go to this prep school down the road, or I'm going to go to this private school, and that's. I think we're putting those things all together, and they're different situations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm obviously biased, but I'm very pro public school.
Yeah.
And that's, we have a lot going on with school vouchers and things going on with state legislation. But I just think about, what is your experience going to be, right? And I think sometimes kids think this is going to help me get to the point of being a college basketball player, or whatever the case may be, whether that be D1, D2, NAI, whatever it is. But sometimes when you talk to these kids after they have that, the experience to get to that point and achieve that goal wasn't the best experience. Was that goal really worth it? Right? Like, was it worth leaving my friends in the community that I was in to be able to go to one of these places? I think that's what we have to really be careful of. And like I said, not look at it all as one topic. It's every situation is just so different.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Because I think if you go to one of those top academies, you better love basketball.
Right.
It better not be something you're just liking.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're there to do.
Yeah. They don't give scholarships for like.
And I used to tell my players that were just going off to college, it's getting ready to become a job. And so it's kind of my job to prepare you for that to be a job.
Absolutely.
It's not a job here, but it's going to be. And we have to prepare them for that. So, but I do agree to leave some of these schools that I've seen kids leave with the great coaches here locally we have. I think you would have to go to an IMG, linked, an Oak Hill or something to beat the coaching Now, maybe you can go for free or something, and that makes a difference.
Right.
But I'm with you. I think everybody lumps them into one big thing, and it's not. It's categorized. How do you keep your guys focused? In your program at Walnut Grove, doing everything they can to help you improve as a program, while that they're focused on getting as good as they can and maybe trying to go to that next level.
Really, it's building excitement for playing the style that you want to play. You talked about having a system and teaching the skills within that system, but I think we can provide when it comes to high school basketball, right? Like, kids have different parts of their basketball season most of the time, because kids specialize now. Basketball is year round. But there's different parts to that. The fall is just generally, it's fall for everybody. Then we get to, the school season, and we're in season, and then you get, as the spring picks up, then we're into AAU and travel and select and club. And I think what you have to do is realize or remember that what we can give them is a sense of culture that they get to experience every single day.
Yeah.
There's great AAU programs out there, and they're great because they have a great culture, even though they only get to see those kids 2 to 3 times a week or over a weekend or sometimes a week long on these trips that they go on. And we have great organizations in the DFW area that do a really good job, and they coach them at a high level. There's a high level of skill taught. I think coaches need to get out of the mindset of just being anti-AU. Like, it's not going anywhere. It's been here for too long, and I think you just gotta make it fit with your program. But again, on a day in and day out basis, I get to see those kids, and that's the difference. And so it's constantly letting them know, like, hey, everything you're doing in here, we have to be intentional with, because kids, you can say we're going to open up the gym. That kid's tired because you've been making him wake up every single day, and he's not intentional with that time in the gym. Then you got to pull back on that kid and be like, hey, sleep in tomorrow. Like, it's okay, right? Because they're also practicing 3 times with their AAU team during that season.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think you got to mix the two at some points. But I just still think, like, making them active participants individually in the culture that we have, that's what we can give them on a day in and day out basis that no one else can.
Yeah, I always just felt like I just tried to coach my ass off to the point where a kid felt like I can't go anywhere else and be more loved and coached than right here.
Right.
And then if they did decide to do that, I knew I put everything I had into it. So let's talk about social media a little bit. I know you are all on it and use it to your benefit. 8 years ago, when I got out of public school, it was back then, 47 characters or whatever is going to lose your scholarship.
Right.
But, now I think I would be using social media as a way to teach kids how to build a great brand, because they can now turn that brand into something at a young age.
Yeah.
So I just want to, get your, personal feelings on how you handle the social media within your program, how you try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a tool. So we didn't play in the TABC showcase, but I worked it for Coach Ryle at Hebron. And it was funny, we had, I was in charge of a gym and the college coaches, so I just got to hang out with them and talk to different coaches all day. And so there was a staff came in, there was a head coach and 2 assistants. They sat down and they're watching the game, and the head coach points out a kid. It's like, who is that? And like, I like him, but they're at the end of the game. It was like 4th quarter. Like, I like that kid. When's he play again? And every one of the coaching staffs gets like a binder with the rosters and the schedule or whatever. But one of the assistants knew who it was. And so while other assistants looking through the binder, that assistant pulls it up and he goes to Twitter. He knew the kid's name, pulls it up, and then what does that kid have? He has his schedule for TABC pinned right there at the top of his Twitter profile. Well, what does he also probably have in his bio? He's got his GPA. He's got he's 6'3". Well, now those coaches are being like, no, I see him in person. He really is 6'3".
Yeah.
And it was just a perfect example that I got to see up close and personal of, that's, that had an impact. They went to go watch that kid later on that night because the head coach was like, I like that kid, but I need to see him for a full game. And so I just think it's a tool. But at the same time, like everybody, I think coaches get worried about it. You know, is my kid going to make a mistake that's going to jeopardize them playing for me or playing in the future? And so the number one thing I would tell kids is don't ever put emotion into any post that you have, right? Like, especially negative emotion. You know, make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to hurt you, obviously. And kids hear that all the time. And I think that's a big difference. Like when I started hearing about social media and being careful about it, like that was new information. The kids that we have now, they've heard it their whole life.
Yeah, that's true.
So they kind of glaze over. They get tired head with all of it. And so we have to reframe, I think, the communication that we have with kids about it, which is social media is no different than any form of communication. It's different from talking in person, but it's a form of communication. So if you're not going to be positive in nature with what you're saying in person, then you need to make sure you're not doing that online. And I think we need to be less anti with the tone that we have in these conversations, because I think that brings in a generational gap that kids put up a wall and be like, all right, old man, like, whatever, exactly. You know, like kids don't even know what VCRs are anymore, right? Like, so I just think we just got to reframe the type of conversation we're having with the kid. And then I think they embrace it a lot more. And the deal is too, like kids don't even like Twitter. Like a majority of kids that are on Twitter are usually athletes. They're athletes that are using it as a tool. And so then it's like, okay, Twitter's that tool. Here's how we're going to do it. And so that's one thing that, you know, I want to sit down with our kids and say, hey, you know, put a profile pic of you in your uniform. Make sure your bio has the right things in it, and just be intentional like we do with everything else with how we use it as a tool. And then all the other stuff, Instagram, you know, Snapchat, Be Real, you know, TikTok, all of it, like just be smart, right? And don't be anti in the tone that we have when we're talking about those other things that they just want to have fun with.
No, I like the fact the way you framed it as it's a form of communication. So it's how we communicate today, and they need to learn how to communicate properly, just as we did when we were younger. Let's talk more about technology and how you're using it in your program. You know, I know there's tons of technology now for coaches to use. I used to break film up from a VHS tape, somehow change it to a CD and DVD or whatever. And then when I finished, Huddle was just kind of making its breach on the coaching market. So what's your favorite tech out there, you know, and how are you personally using it?
So from a coaching standpoint, really for me, it's just something as simple as Huddle Assist. So everybody has Huddle. You film your games, it uploads it. It's easy for the kids to watch, easy for the coaches to navigate. Assist is just an extra part that allows you to have that film broken down in 24 hours, and it gives you the analytical side. Like that's entered into our game. It's important. For me personally, when I watch and I'm, you know, prepping for a team, I am bad about, and this is where I learned a lot from Coach Ellis, and working with him of working on a scout, is I don't see players necessarily. Obviously, I'm 10 films in. I know who their top 3 players are. But, like, I'm looking at the X's and O's side. That's where my focus is as I'm going through film. So now when I'm done with the watching of the film, Huddle Assist provides, you know, really some truth to what I'm seeing, right? Like, it's checking me to make sure that what I'm seeing is actually true from a number standpoint. So being able to pull up a kid's shot chart, you know, his points per, or a team's points per possession, like, we might think, hey, they have a pretty good offense. Well, then I've got every one of their game films. They've all been sent off, and I got them back, and I have their points per possession, and it's not that great. Well, okay, then you know we need to reframe how we're thinking about them. And so for me, it's just kind of it's just checking what I see on the film, but then from a standpoint of my focus being the X's and O's side, now that personal information for each player is saying, okay, I think their top 3 guys are these 3. Usually I'm right about that, but it's like, hey, this other kid, you know, is he a good shooter? Whatever the case may be, it's going to tell me if that's true or not. And so sometimes the film, you watch so much of it, you feel like your eyes are bleeding by the end. You can start telling yourself some fibs, and they can grow into truths in your head. And those Huddle Assist just gives you that analytical perspective that can kind of just level it out a little bit and get you to a better truth of what you might see. And once the ball gets tipped, you never really know. That kid that you didn't think you have any film of him hitting shots, then your players are going to look at you like you're dumb. But I just think it's a good tool. Another one, and this goes from like a branding standpoint of what is Canva. Just super simple, and I think it's being used more and more from a coaching standpoint. Just being able to build graphics, right? And you can make a post about a kid, but you put that same post with a picture of them from a game with their stat line from the game. That means a lot more, right? That's going to mean something to that kid, and that's what we're doing this for, is for kids. But it's also just leveling up your social media. And one of the things I did in the spring, we had some of our guys going to play. I just made player profiles for them. I tweeted it out and told them, height, weight, GPA, just a little bit of information about those kids. But it's just super simple, right? Like there's been like Photoshop and those things. I'm completely functioning with technology, but like that upper echelon of stuff like that, I need to be quick, fast, and be made simple for me. So Canva is exactly that. So it's something you can throw together like really, really quick. Like I woke up, I remember July 4th, and I was like, I don't want to do a Walnut Grove post about it. And I'm on my phone before I get out of bed, and like in 2 minutes, I've made a graphic that looks great. And somebody was like, man, how'd you make that? And I was like, dude, I did it on my phone. Like, it's not that hard.
It's our social media, man.
Yeah, like it just keeps going. And I got people asking me for t-shirts, like, hey, design a t-shirt. And I can throw it all together real quick and send it to them. Like, so it's just a lot of the things you don't think about on the side of coaching or other people don't think about. Like, it's just another easy, useful tool that's just super efficient.
Well, and then I personally think branding your program is so important. I wanted to speak to you a little bit about what do you envision the culture of your program at Walnut Grove to be? The brand of it.
So when they announced Walnut Grove and I knew that I was going to apply, I sat down and basically it was time to put together all of those different things that you've been thinking about and working on your entire career and put it all into that nice little pretty packet that they want. But I wanted everything I put into that interview process to be genuine, not just trying to get me a job, so I could hit the ground running when it was time. And so where I arrived first at was just that a program is a reflection of its head coach. And so to me, that's where a head coach sets the standard for the culture. And so at the time, again, I got super lucky with the timing of everything. I was going through the Quad A program in Prosper ISD, led by Valerie Little. It's aspiring athletic administrators. And we had our first speaker was our superintendent, Dr. Holly Ferguson, and she's phenomenal. And one of the things she said in that her speech was that all great leaders are readers. And so I'm sitting there taking notes, and I'm like, great, like I kind of checked that box because that is something I try to be very intentional with is reading. And so what I did was I said, okay, well, who am I then? Like what standard am I going to be able to set on a daily basis? So I started, and that's kind of a loaded question to ask yourself. So I started with that portion of the reading component, and off my bookshelf, I pulled the top 10 books that had made an impact on me over the years that I had read as a coach, right? And some of them were coaching, some of them were just in general self-help or whatever you want to call them. And so I like to annotate. I like to mark up books when I read them, a physical form because I do audiobooks too. But I tried to make a list of all the characteristics, all the things that I highlighted, I underlined, and I made this long list of all the different things. And I kind of matched some of them up and said this one and this one are together and it falls under this one. And so what I arrived at was, I remember it was an odd number. It was 7 to 9 different characteristics that came up over multiple books that I had read. And so I put those on a Google form and I sent them out to, I've been at Prosper for a long time, and I sent them out to all the people that I felt like I would have a accurate opinion on who I am on a daily basis. And so if somebody was to ask that question, these are the people I think would be able to truly answer that. And so I waited for the results to come back in, and I had 3 that stood out from a number standpoint, and 2 of them I kind of expected to definitely be at the top of the list. and then there's another one that, kind of made sense. So for us, we're, I've been already doing the hashtag on everything is TDG, which is toughness, discipline, and grit, and so we're going to make sure that we're really intentional at the beginning of the year of what those things mean to our program. But that's what the people on a daily basis said about me. And I think as coaches can sometimes have a motto or I like this and pull it from some social media. I think you just have to be careful that fits who you are. Kids aren't stupid. If you're not doing those things, like sometimes people have like a core value of empathy, and they might have a coach that is the least empathetic figure they know. Well, then now you've lost the room when it comes to your culture and that kid. And so it was important for me to be, what I'm going to preach to the kids or what other people have said, that's what I bring on a daily basis. And so that's what we want to do, and that's what we're going to brand it as. And those, the TDG and toughness, discipline, and grit, those are going to be the standards of what we're going to hold our kids to every single day, because I know that's what people have said about me, but it also frames it for me like, hey, you need to be these things. This is what people said. That's what your kids expect. You need to hold them to those standards.
I think it shows a lot of maturity as a coach to take that approach as to how you were going to brand and the culture you wanted to build, because I do feel it all drips from the very top. Your team is going to act how you act on the sideline. If you spend all your time worrying about the officiating, I promise you your kids are going to spend most of their time worrying about officiating. So I've always been impressed, with your winning mindset. You're positive on the court, although you're doing a lot of correction. And sometimes your correction isn't, in a tone of voice that's nice and soft. But I know it's a winning mindset. I know the kids know you care about them, so you can correct the way you do correct. But most of the time when I hear you, it's pretty much positivity. I'm sure the classroom's the same way. How do you keep yourself motivated, each and every day? I do know it gets tiring and it's hard every morning to get up.
It does. I mean, honestly, and this is going to sound cliche and like a cop-out, but like, I just love my job, right? Like, they say follow or trust the process, or, any of those sayings. Like, I just love showing up every day and doing it. Like, I've always known this is what I wanted to do. Once I started doing it, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be, because I had that perspective at an early age of like, this is what coaching is, because I had a coach that I followed and took the perspective of a coach. So nothing was really a surprise. And then, people say like you get into coaching for kids. I don't think that's completely accurate, right? Like, I was 22 years old. I was barely older than these kids. I think people stay in coaching, and I think you fall in love with coaching because of the relationships with kids. And so, like the parts that people don't like about coaching, or teaching or any of it, like I enjoy some of those things that people don't like, and the parts that people hate. It's not. I hear from other people, I just don't mind them as much. Like, I don't like them, right? But like, I don't. There's nothing that I hate about my job. And, I'm relatively still new in it, and so I know it's going to continue to be a grind, but. For me, it's just the year in and year out process and segmenting your year and the parts of your year and trying to get better each and every single day, and being intentional with how you do that. I think that's the easy motivation that comes with all the other stuff that comes with coaching.
Just enjoying the process, the improvement that helps get you through. I totally agree. So you have achieved at a high level in work life. I know you have to have a system of goal setting and things. So, you've talked a little bit about how you went about, your brand and things for your program. How do you personally approach, setting goals and planning for the future? Because I know you don't just let life happen.
Right. I think it's, people talk about 5-year plans and those things, and I had a 5-year plan. And so I think you can't just leave it at 5 years. I think you need to segment it out and break it down into portions, right? So I think the most important part is being really intentional with how you get better. And if you do that, if you're really intentional with that, with getting better every day or in this part of the year, this part of the season, that's having a process. Like, again, going back to process, like, people talk about it all the time, but what does that look like?
Yeah.
To me, I define having a process as being intentional with how you improve. And so, you know, it can be anything that you're doing, like whether it's teaching in the classroom. You know, I remember, you know, coaching football, you know, and I love coaching football. I think it had a huge impact on me, and being able to have this opportunity to be a head basketball coach. I always try to find, like, I'm going to get better at this year. And so in the classroom, coaching another sport, whatever it is, I think you just have to be really thoughtful in getting better each and every year, but be forward thinking in, yeah, I'm going to have a 5-year plan. What do I need to get better at this year to be able to do that? And then break it down into parts of your year. And then also make sure that this week, what am I doing? And on a daily basis, what are your habits that are going to allow you to be successful? And I think one of the mistakes that people can make sometimes is having a to-do list and think getting that from top to bottom on that to-do list means that you're getting better. And, like, no, that comes with the job of knocking those things out. What are you doing that's taking time away from that to improve?
Yeah.
You know, whether it be reading, writing, or you know, listening to other people speak. And, you know, and so for me, that's the biggest thing, is just, you know, where are you going? But then you got to really segment out how you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people set goals, but they really don't have the plan to actually, and the intention to attack that goal. So
Absolutely.
I'm someone that believes the obstacles, the way, you know, I think the challenges we face in our life make us who we are. Can you talk a little bit about a time when maybe you've had to overcome an obstacle or a personal challenge, and, you know, maybe how it's impacted your life, career, or just maybe it's how you coach and how you approach players and things?
Yeah, I mean, we all got rocked by COVID. And so for me, my story of COVID, we all have ours. Right before COVID happened, I actually turned down an opportunity to take a promotion. And promises were made at that time that weren't able to be kept because of COVID. And it wasn't anybody's fault. But long story short, I turned down that opportunity to take a promotion, which was the next step for me in becoming a head coach in basketball. And because I turned that down, and then COVID happened, and those promises weren't able to be kept because it was out of everyone's control, I had to continue coaching football. And at the time, my wife was pregnant. And so first off, we go through lockdown, right? Like, so it's, hey, you're going through the mental process of you're about to be a dad. Also, the world completely looks different. It's probably never going to be the same. What does that look like? And so my wife, because her job was essential, she works in healthcare, she was going to work even though she was pregnant. And I was at home 8 hours a day by myself. So, like, the wheels were really turning. And so you went to some dark places sometimes thinking, and because there were so many unknowns at the time. And so we got started with the school year and went back to school, and we all know that year was the hardest year ever in teaching and coaching. There's so many extra things that we had to do. But what people forget is I was coaching football. Football got pushed back at the 6A level significantly by like 2 months. Basketball didn't get pushed back. So I had about a month and a half period. My daughter was born the second week of school. So then I'm grinding through football season. And then we get to the overlap of both. And it was it was Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays of having games. Games were happening on top of the practices that were happening. And so you go back to, you know, trying to be organized, and I'm big on calendars, and every Sunday I plan out every part of my day, Monday through Friday. Like, I had to at that point because I was pulled in 1,000 different directions, and I had a newborn. Our first Christmas, we all had COVID, and I wasn't able to go to school. Like, first Christmas with my child, we all were locked down, didn't get to see family members. When we had my daughter, no one got to come in the room, you know. And so now I look back on that of opening up a school. Like, there's a lot of adversity that comes with that. And so at that time, going through all that, you know, you think, are you doing a good job of being a dad and a coach? Because at this point, it was just trying to be a husband and a coach. And, you know, I just look back at that decision that I had made to not take that promotion, and just, it weighed on me like for your career, maybe it's still the right decision, but for you as a dad and you as a husband, you screwed up. Like you're putting a burden on your wife and your kid that you didn't have to. Obviously, it all worked out, and I'm happy for it. But I look at it now, and opening up a school, there's a ton that comes with it, but it honestly just pales in comparison to that year that we all had to go through. And again, like that's just my COVID story. Everybody has them. But yeah, that was really tough because you're second guessing that. You know, you're still coaching freshman football, and you had an opportunity to take a promotion that the last step was becoming a head coach. Yeah, and you start to have some regret that creeps in, but I just stayed the course and kept working and came out on the other side of it, and now I have a great opportunity.
I think those obstacles often lead to the opportunities, and then it makes us make the most of that opportunity. So that's one reason I think you're going to be so great over there. To wrap up, I want to give you a chance to add anything we may have skipped or missed that you may like to speak on.
No, I mean, I go back to how we started, product of my environment. I was super lucky to be blessed with great parents, have that extension in that coach that allowed me to do this. And sometimes it's tough. Like I think any success that I have, I don't really attribute to me, but to the environment that I've come up with. And then the next one was being in a place like Prosper. It's the only place I've been in. To be able to be a student teacher, to start out and then now be a head coach over a decade later, it's a unique opportunity, and so I'm just very thankful for that. And like I said, I go back to, it's funny, I mentioned the brand and our culture of toughness, discipline, and grit. I think it comes back to that environment piece of I knew that toughness and discipline were going to be on there. Because of my parents. I just go back to that. My mom was the toughest person I've ever met. My dad's the most disciplined, hardworking person I've ever met. Like, I would have bet my life when those results were coming back on that Google form that that's what I was going to have. And so, I'm just super excited about the opportunity. I got great kids, great administration, great districts, great parents, all of it. So I'm ready to get going.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. It's truly been a pleasure. Wish you the best your first season.
Appreciate you.
I'm going to be around there.
I got a t-shirt in the car for you.
All right. So I'm going to wish you continued success in your career, your personal life, and we will still be around.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks.